So it's been a pretty exciting morning for everybody, all right? Pretty darn exciting. Okay, so everybody, and you haven't had lunch yet either, have you? No. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is, this looks a little like the 8th grade dance here, okay? And you remember the 8th grade dance when the boys are on one side and the girls are on the other? So now we have the M1s together and the M2s together. So everybody's got to move now. So you cannot sit next to someone who's in your class. I'll eat up the whole. Let's go, everybody. Let's go. Come on. Come on. Time's a-wasting here. Okay, everybody. Okay. Okay. All right. Now look. All right. Okay, guys, all right, look to your left and right. Is that person in your class? All right, have you introduced yourself to that person? Okay? All right, this is great. Now, you know what the interesting thing is here? This is an interesting observation. So, right now, the M1s will do almost anything we tell them, right? And the M2s don't realize they're M2s yet. They still think they're M1s. So they haven't made the transition. So in about a month, they're not going to listen to anything we say, right? So, it's a great exercise here in human nature. So I think a couple things. One of the reasons that I wanted to do that is, as we talked about, is about this being a family, and it is important to know your, younger brother, younger sister, older brother, older sister. And I think the other part of this is, and the M2s, I think know this from their experience last year, this is about helping each other. And you heard yesterday, the M1s heard about collaboration and all that. And so, as I said to the M1s yesterday, they should look to the M2s and 3s and 4s for advice and counsel. And then next year, the then M2s will be doing the same thing for the then M1s. So I think it's really important to do. So I know there's going to be some opportunities for you later in the week to get together, but it's a good time to get started now, particularly after the morning you've had. So we're gonna definitely finish on time today. So a couple things. So the M1s are still very early in this, and the M1s, I was just talking to Dr. McGeehan, you've not had to talk about the competencies yet, the M1s, have you? The CMSRU competencies? No. Okay. So which M2 can name the 9? Which M2, there's a prize associated with this. Which M2 can name, without looking on your, Catherine, put hands down, screens down, the 9 CMSRU competencies? Who can name 5? Who said that? Diversity? No. Okay. Suzanne, what's that? Service? Huh? Scholarly inquiry. Sam's got it. That's 2. Okay? Don't. Who's looking? Huh? Learning and working in teams. Jess, good. Okay? Collaboration. That goes in that one. Medical knowledge. Hey, how about that? You know, we probably ought to, but Tim, did you and Rich collaborate on that answer? Is it? Okay, good job. Okay. All right, that's 4. What's that? Systems-based practice. So can you, are you going to tell everybody what that is?
To understand better, like the greater healthcare system.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. All right. All right. Any more? Problem solving? You should have stopped with medical knowledge. What's that? Patient advocacy, community partnership. Community partnership's one of them. I'm losing count now, Dr. McGeehan. You got them? Problem-based? No. All right, so that's enough. That's enough. One more. Patient advocacy is in the mission statement, core values, but not a competency, okay? So one of the reasons the competencies are important is that it's one of the things that you're evaluated on. And it goes into your, evaluations, and then is part of that, and will ultimately go into what's called the dreaded dean's letter. When you go to apply for residency, it goes into that letter. So you'll obviously hear more about them, and the M2s, I'm sure, will get the rest of them before they graduate. So the one that we're going to talk about right now, we're just going to get started talking about, is professionalism. And this is, I think, a really important one. And when Dr. McGeehan and I and the other deans sit around and talk about just what we want to see in our graduates, obviously we know and expect everyone will be competent and knowledgeable and technically sound and have all of those attributes. That goes without saying. I mean, that's not a goal. That's just what we expect. But there are some other things that separate great physicians from all others, and the M1s may remember that we talked about some of those during your interviews. And one of those things is professionalism. One of those things is professionalism. And so, while being a physician is a profession, and you are called a professional, that doesn't necessarily equate with professionalism, does it? Who knows who Aaron Hernandez is? Kyle, who's Aaron Hernandez?
Former New England Patriot tight end.
A professional football player. Okay. For those of you who don't know Aaron Hernandez, keep going. All right. All right, so we can fill in the blank with anybody who was in a profession who may not have exhibited professionalism, right? So they're not synonymous despite the same derivation. And certainly one can exhibit professionalism without being a professional in the strictest definition of the term. So that's what we're talking about here. So let me ask the M2s. So in clinic last year or during week on the wards, did you see any lack of professionalism? Who wants to? Amanda, did you say yes? Okay. So would you care to share de-identifying anyone who may be involved?
Sure. So sometimes
Tell everybody who you are, because the M1s don't know you yet.
I'm Amanda. I'm an M2.
Right.
Who did the discussion board?
Yeah, so M1, I was on Blackboard, and a few of you asked questions. Most of you seem to know it already, so. If you have more questions, though, we're all happy to answer them. So I think a good example of a lack of professionalism that we see is people talking about patients, sometimes not in a respectful way.
Okay. Any of the other M2s see that last year? Any other, the M2s seen other lack of professionalism during week on the wards or in clinic? Anybody? Or was everybody extraordinarily professional? No? Everybody was good? You see anybody texting in the OR? Right? Okay. Anybody see that? When have you texted in the OR? Okay. Who raised their hand? Who else raised their hand? Joe, go ahead.
The only thing I saw was, as you said, I see anesthesiologists texting all the time, so I'm not really sure.
All right. So it may be that they were texting about some patient issue. It's possible.
But I also saw them planning trips.
And that's why they went into anesthesiology. Okay? So how about the M1s? A lot of you have done shadowing and had clinical experiences. Any lack of professionalism in the clinical world? Go ahead. Tell everybody who you are.
I'm Rachel. I saw two doctors arguing in the ER.
Okay. Two doctors arguing in the ER. We've all seen that. Okay. So let me ask you this, M2s. Did you see any lack of professionalism between any of your classmates and you? Or did you observe any lack of professionalism? Forget about being in the clinic. James. Okay. How about anything a little less business related, like being disrespectful or perhaps, as you'll hear from Dr. Weil, posting something inappropriate on Facebook or Twitter? Anybody seen any of that? Forgetting Donald Trump for the time being, right? All right, so the point here is that, and I said this to the M1s yesterday, and I said it to the M2s last year on opening day, is that you're now a professional. You are in the profession of medicine. And everybody's going to view you that way. Anything you do now will stick with you the rest of your career. And so it's a different environment now. And so we are all aware of some of the very egregious examples of lack of professionalism. How many people here, you don't have to raise your hand because would be a HIPAA violation. So a number of you have been in the hospital, right? People here have been in the hospital, I mean as a patient. And I suspect that in retrospect, you can think about some unprofessional things that you saw, right? So I think one of the most telling moments in the life of someone who's in healthcare is to be a patient. And when you become a patient, you start to see things and hear things a different way. So when you're on the elevator, when you hear a couple residents talking about Mrs. So-and-so and how about that autopsy and I got so much work, right? You start hearing that. When you start hearing nurses complaining about their supervisor, you start hearing that. When you start seeing people texting when they're at your bedside, you're going to recognize that. And you may not recognize that now. But when it happens, and it will happen, you'll notice it. And, you know, Dr. McGeehan gives a great talk about when he was a patient. And a lot of what is in that talk is about what it means to be on the other side of the sheets. And a lot of things that we take for granted when we're providers of care is something that you all need to think about. And it is, you know, being a physician's hard and it's very stressful, and sometimes, you know, we make light of things to reduce that stress, right? We do that. That's not so good when you're on the other end. There's also some unfortunate examples of lack of professionalism that occur between classmates, between, you know, people outside of the healthcare arena. And, you know, unfortunately, we've seen some of those as well, and I think that's just part of being a human being to see that. But those are also the things we're talking about, professionalism. So it's not just when you're on call, it's not just when you're in clinic, it's in everything you do. But let's put aside bad professionalism for a moment, because those things are pretty easy to see. I mean, you know, this is like, which of these is not like the other when you were a kid? Remember that in books, she'd say, which one of these is not like the other? It's pretty easy to see bad professionalism, and we can learn a lot from that, right? You can sometimes learn more from seeing things done poorly than well. But what we need to do is focus on great examples of professionalism, and we need to celebrate those. So rather than looking at this from a, oh my God, how am I going to keep myself out of trouble? How am I going to display great professionalism? And we've seen some great professionalism. We've seen some great professionalism among our students, from simple things as helping a classmate out, helping somebody who may be on a leave of absence, those kinds of things. And so I think it's important that we celebrate those. There are any number of ways that you can do that when you're with patients. And I think that one of the things we've put in place is a system in which anybody can report examples of great professionalism or not so great professionalism. And obviously, we'd prefer to see examples of great professionalism, not just to see them, but have them captured. And one of the things that we do as we think about you, and as we're getting into with the charter class now one of the things that the team is working on is preparing their applications for residency programs. And I mentioned what's called the Dean's Letter, which is really the MSPE. But part of that is not a recommendation letter. It's not a recommendation letter. It's really to tell the residency programs it's an evaluation, right? It's not a recommendation. And it's, right, Dr. McGee? It's an evaluation. And the evaluation needs to be on target. And so part of it is going to be about academic performance and how people did. And, people will look at the board scores and do whatever that. But part of it's going to be about how is this individual as a human being, how is this individual going to be as someone in your residency program? And this is really incredibly important. And I think in many respects, it's more important than what your step 1 score is. I'm sorry to tell the M2s that. In many respects it is. No matter how good your step 1 score is, if your MSP doesn't reflect great professionalism and all the kind of attributes that everybody wants to see in a physician, that's a killer. And that's not saying that you should be professional or just because it'll show up in your MSPE if you're not. But I think you got to think about these things. And if you think about it, it doesn't end with your grade, it doesn't end with your MSPE. It should never end, because you're always going to be evaluated. And whether or not it's somebody else evaluating you, or you're evaluating yourself, which is probably what we all need to do more of, you got to be confident that you're doing these things. And so I suspect that you've all had experiences, or many of you had experiences with physicians who were technically sound, clinically competent, but didn't exhibit a lot of the things you would view as ideal, right? And just turn on the television, watch House for 30 seconds if you can stand it, okay? So there's some great examples of lack of professionalism, which unfortunately gets celebrated in many respects. And so, I think we worry a little bit about seeing some of those things. And so one of the things, and the M2s know this, I think, we've declared this year the year of professionalism. And every year, we are going to do a little bit different continuum theme, we call them. So there are things that we have throughout the curriculum that may be a little hard to identify. So we can identify, the M2s can identify what they learned about diabetes, or God forbid the Krebs cycle, or some of these other things. But it's a little harder to identify things like, where did you see and learn about and hear about professionalism, or cultural competence, or the social determinants of health, or dealing with military families. Where did you encounter those other things? So those are threads that will be woven, need to be woven throughout your 4 years. And for the M1s, when you get into your ALGs, you're going to see some of the cases that you have those kind of things in there. A little harder to think about them as compared to maybe it's about a congestive heart failure case or something else, but these are the threads that need to be woven throughout, and so our team is working hard on that, and all of you will have the opportunity to participate in those, and we're going to do one of these a year. So this year is going to be professionalism, and they're all important, but I think that the idea of being a professional and being a great physician is really going to mandate that we do this. And as I said yesterday to you, to the M1s, I said that, stay every bit as enthusiastic and passionate and committed to this profession as you are on this day. I don't know if the M2s feel the same way as they did last year at this time, because med school's hard and it's pretty easy to get a little bit consumed with all the hard work and the tests. And there's some pretty good evidence, some very good evidence about the erosion of empathy during medical school. So you have people who come in are all idealistic and they want to be here. And if you look very clearly over 4 years, it generally goes down. So we wind up graduating physicians who are now less empathetic, a little more cynical, and that's the trend we want to reverse. So who knows here what the hidden curriculum is? It's probably pretty well hidden, right? Who knows? Somebody was speaking up. Anybody? Okay, Dr. McGeehan, do you know what the hidden curriculum is?
Sure do.
Would you tell everyone?
The hidden curriculum are the things you see and experience in these 4 years that aren't in the textbooks, but they're at the bedside and they're in the interactions with others that give you the wrong impression of the way things should be at times.
Okay, so it's called hidden because nobody says it's the right thing you do, but we talked about texting in the OR, we talked about, arguing in the ER, and when you start seeing people who are allegedly your role models, be they a resident, be they an upper class student, be they a physician, suddenly it seems like it's okay. It's okay to make fun of that patient. It's okay to say something about a colleague. It's okay because, my attending did it, or my resident did it, and look at them, so it's obviously, must be okay. And so the hidden curriculum is an extraordinarily dangerous thing. And it's something that, we're working very hard on, but it's also something you'll have to work very hard on. It's also something we're working on very hard with the people who are often the perpetrators of the hidden curriculum, be they attending physicians or nurses or residents. We've got to work on that end as well. We've got to make sure that they're portraying themselves and acting in a way that's consistent with what we think people should be in this profession. So we're going to talk more about this, but I know that the M1s have a lot of things on their mind. I know the M2s have a lot of things on their mind, but particularly for the M2s, we talked about the transition to the clinical years. In addition to getting ready for step 1, you got to start thinking about this stuff too. And for the M1s, hope you hold on to that and think about this too as we go forward, because at the end of the day, this will separate those of you who will be great from those of you who will be everybody else. And I want you to just keep your eye on that ball. So this is just the beginning. We're going to talk about this more, and we're going to really talk about getting all of you engaged in this, in terms of this being one of the hallmarks of this year. We talked to the M1s about this is a big year for us. This is the graduation of the first class. A lot of good stuff going on this year. So there's no better thing to do this year as we launch our charter class than to really talk about professionalism as they begin the rest of their career. So I'll stop here. Any questions, comments? All right. Have a good lunch. Have a good afternoon.